A little teaser for Faith in Abertillery, narrated by the author, Tracy Traynor. Chapter 1. Just after 11 o'clock on a February evening in 1905, a solo voice rings out with the hymn, "Here is love, vast as the ocean." Maybe 1,000 people are crammed into Ebenezer's Baptist Church in Abertillery. Leaning over the gallery, squashed amongst the bodies of mostly well-built miners, is a skinny young redhead called Faith, attending this evening's service simply to find out what all the ballyhoo is about. Expectant silence captivates as the miner's voice fills the church. Loving kindness as the flood. Goosebumps prickle along Faith's arms, and the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. The voice, rich and deep, resonates throughout the church, carrying the man's convictions with powerful intensity. Moved beyond explanation, tears trickle down her cheeks. Glancing at the surrounding people, she finds lots of them crying unashamedly, their faces impassioned with love. During the third line of the hymn, when the Prince of Life our ransom starts up, the congregation joins in. Vibrant sound rises and erupts, filling the church with explosive tension as people fling their hearts into worship. Convinced it's the sound that angels would surely make, Faith takes a timorous peek at the wooden rafters, half expecting an angelic presence. Her atheist life knew nothing of God or religion. In fact, she believed that if there was a God, then at birth he'd seen her defects and cast her aside without mercy. What am I doing here, she thinks. Sorrow clings to her persona like limpets on a stone. I'm too wicked for this place. Desperate need to escape the atmosphere of love makes her spin around and start pushing her way towards the exit. It's slow going. People eager to see the front of church are straining forward in their praise. Most of them, caught up in their own rhapsody, don't even realise she's trying to leave. Living her worst nightmare, where moving forward is impossibly difficult, like wading through mud. Fear makes her shudder, realising that just like her night terrors, someone is after her. "Let me through," she wails, her flailing arms knocking anyone who's close. Eventually a gap opens, and she's able to stumble her way forward towards the door. "You all right, girl?" a notably plump yet kindly woman inquires. Faith's eyes are wide with distress. She moves past the woman, not registering what she's asked. Instead, all she takes in is the overly tall flower pot hat on the woman's head, which brims over with black crushed silk roses. Funeral hat, Faith thinks, continuing forward with her push. With relief, she reaches the narrow wooden stairwell. Yet in her haste she trips and starts to fall down the last few stairs. The awful feeling of falling rushes from her feet to her head, and panic tosses bile into her stomach. Disaster is averted when strong arms catch her and bring her safely to the ground. Glancing up to regard her saviour, she locks onto the warmest pair of sea-blue eyes she's ever encountered. The man who holds her by the elbows gazes back for a moment before letting her go. "I ran out of here the first time I was touched. You should stay, though. There is great peace here," he tells her. With a quick glance, Faith gauges he's a toff. More obvious than his immaculate attire is his air of self-assured arrogance. Oh, she knows all about his type. Before stopping to think about it, she sticks her tongue at him and then runs out through the door. Cold air hits her and she regrets leaving instantly. She feels vacant and detached. Icy, wispy wind caresses her face, flicking her long hair into the air. Yet it isn't the cold making her shiver. It's the sudden knowledge that she's just left behind something precious. This loss emphasizes her own emptiness and solitude. Instead of taking the path back home, she tiptoes alongside the church wall, tracing her fingers along the austere brickwork in the dark. The words of the second verse filter through the building, and she leans her head against the freezing wall as the words, "Heaven's peace and perfect justice kissed a guilty world in love," comes pulsating from the building. Gripped with pain, she crumples upon the grass as a hidden compartment within her soul cracks open. The anguish of squashed rejection erupts, causing her to sob. Her skirts and underskirts billow around her, forming a sea of brown ruffles. Wrapping her arms around her body, she tries to stay the waves of nauseating pain. The tightly fitted jacket buttoned up to her neck does nothing to stem the cold or the agony. Suddenly she is nudged out of her grieving bubble as a heavy coat is wrapped around her shoulders. She doesn't need to look up to see who it is, for the slight smell of musky cologne tells her that the coat belongs to the man with the deep blue eyes. Here. Faith is grateful for the soft cotton handkerchief he passes her and wipes her face with gentle dabs. After a moment she puts her hand out against the cold, hard wall and pushes herself up. "Thank you." Her voice is halting, her gaze cast downwards. "Come, let me walk you home." "No." Faith's head snaps up, looking at him. She doesn't care that her face will no doubt be red and blotchy. "Thank you for your kindness," she says, shrugging off the coat and handing it back to him. "But I can see myself home, thank you." Taking the coat, he watches as she marches, with a somewhat awkward gait, towards the street with her head held high. "Geoffrey, where are you? What are you doing out here?" Slipping his coat back on, he turns and starts walking towards his sister. "I thought I could help someone, Margaret. It seems I was wrong. It is late. What do you think? Shall we retire?" "Yes, I'm exhausted. I don't want to miss a minute of anything. However, we've been here for 5 hours now, and I really do desire to be home." He offers Margaret an elbow, through which she hooks her white-gloved hand, and then they walk the short way down the road to where their bright red Bungham carriage awaits. The driver, who'd been pacing up and down to keep warm, is quick to step forward and open the carriage door. "Milady," he says, holding the door wide. Margaret nods her thanks, hitches up her skirt, and steps inside. After a moment, when there is no sign of her brother, Margaret leans forward, sticking her head back outside. "Are you coming, Geoffrey?" Geoffrey is looking down the dimly lit street. He can't be sure, but he has a feeling that the young redhead is watching them. "Geoffrey?" Pulled out of his sudden trance of intrigue, Geoffrey moves forward, dipping his head as he climbs in beside her. Faith watches as the driver steps up onto his high box seat and cracks the whip above the horse's head. She doesn't like men, none of them. They were the bane of her life, and yet this tall, distinguished stranger had just crept under her skin and sparked her interest. "Good night to you, kind sir," she whispers, before hurrying down the street. She needed to be up at 6, and this now meant that tomorrow was going to be a long day, and all because she had let curiosity get the better of her.